After marrying far from home, I haven't returned for the new year in 10 years. This year, I had already discussed it with Erick. We would take our son and celebrate at my parents' house. When my mom found out, she started preparing for the holiday a month in advance. But then, I received a message from the ticketing app. Erick had still booked tickets to his family's home. I thought he had made a mistake, so I went to ask him about it, only to overhear his conversation with our son. Son, don't forget what Dad taught you. If Mom asks, cry and say you don't want to go to your grandparents' house. Lucas grinned confidently. Don't worry, Dad. I'll cling to Mom and make sure she doesn't have a chance to leave. They thought I would give in, just like I always had. But they didn't realize that their endless demands had already drained me, both physically and emotionally. I said nothing. Silently, I bought my own ticket and embarked on the journey home alone. Chapter 1. I was packing our luggage for the trip home when my mom called. It had been far too long since I last went back, and as soon as I answered, I couldn't suppress the smile on my face. Mom, you called at the perfect time. I'm packing right now. Tell me if there's anything you want, I'll bring it for you. Her voice was filled with excitement. We have everything here. You don't need to bring anything. If there's anything you need, your dad will go buy it when you get here. It's such a long journey, and you and Erick have to bring the child along. Don't overpack, it'll be too inconvenient. And be careful on the way back. Her concern was justified. The place where Erick and I lived was quite remote. First, we had to take a 5-hour bus ride, followed by a 38-hour high-speed train journey, and finally, a taxi from the station to reach home. She was worried that a young boy like Lucas wouldn't be able to sit still for such a long trip. She reminded me over and over again about all the little details, even more carefully than I, his own mother, had considered. Got it. I patiently reassured her. We talked for 2 hours until my phone was burning hot in my hand, and only then did she reluctantly hang up. Thinking about how soon I would finally see her again filled me with energy. In less than half an hour, I had packed all my belongings. After finishing my own luggage, I took a short break before starting to pack for Erick and Lucas. Suddenly, a message notification popped up on my phone with a sharp ding. I glanced at the screen. It was a confirmation for a bus ticket, scheduled for 3 days later. Heading to the neighboring town, my heart sank. Erick's parents lived there. Ever since I married into this family, we had spent every single new year at his parents' house. In our second year of marriage, I had wanted to go home for the holidays, just once. But before the trip, I found out I was pregnant. The doctor said it was a high-risk pregnancy, so I had no choice but to cancel my plans. Then, our child was born prematurely, weak and fragile. My mom was worried about the long journey with such a small baby. So every year, she and my dad had made the long trip instead, coming to visit me instead of the other way around. But this year was supposed to be different. I had spoken to Erick a month ago, and we had agreed to go to my family's home this time. He even said, "It's been so many years. We should bring lots of gifts for your parents." Then what was this ticket? Why had he booked us tickets back to his parents' house again? I forced myself to stay calm, convincing myself that it was probably just a habit. Maybe he had bought the tickets absent-mindedly. Forgetting what we had planned, I went to the study to talk to him, wanting to clear things up. Just as I was about to knock, I heard Erick's voice inside. "Lucas, don't forget what I taught you. If Mom asks, cry and tell her you don't want to go to your grandparents' house." My hand trembled midair. For a second, I thought I had misheard. But the next moment, my son's childish voice rang out, firm and confident. "Got it, Dad. I won't let Mom go to Grandma's." Chapter 2. Despite the shock in my heart, I maintained a calm facade and knocked on the study door. Inside, Erick was working at his desk while Lucas was building Lego blocks beside him. Father and son simultaneously furrowed their brows, as if my presence had interrupted their perfect little scene. Suppressing the bitterness in my heart, I asked knowingly, "I just got a message. Why did you buy tickets to your parents' house? Didn't we agree to go to my family's place this year? Did you make a mistake?" Erick's frown deepened, clearly displeased with the distant tone in my words. "What do you mean, your parents' house? We've been married for years, and you're still speaking like that? then he brushed the issue aside. We're not going this year. Just let your mom know. We'll visit when we have time. One moment, he's criticizing my wording. The next, he's showing his true colors. How hypocritical. I didn't bother arguing over that and instead asked coldly, why the sudden change? Give me a reason. I told you a month ago that I was going home for the new year. My mom has been looking forward to it for so long. And now you're pulling this stunt. What am I supposed to tell her? Erick's eyes flashed with irritation, as if he was the one being wronged. Am I the one causing trouble? Of all times. Why do you have to go back during New Year? This is the busiest time of the year. If I go to your family's place, what about my work? What if my boss needs me? I almost laughed. Did he think he was some high-ranking officer? That the entire company would collapse without him? And what about Lucas? Erick continued. He's been in school for a whole semester, and now he only has a few weeks of vacation. Did you even ask him if he wants to go? Does he want to rest and enjoy his break at home? Or does he want to be dragged around just because you feel like it? Can you stop being so selfish and think about me and Lucas too? I followed his words and turned toward my son. I softened my voice. Lucas, do you want to go to Grandma's house with Mom? She hasn't seen you in so long, and she really misses you. Lucas kept playing with his Lego, barely glancing up despite the argument between his father and me. He shouted, if you want to go, go by yourself. I'm not going with you. I don't want to see Grandma. I want to spend New Year at Grandma and Grandpa's house. Hearing it was one thing, feeling it was another. And at that moment, in his little hands, he was still playing with the very Lego set my mom had gone out of her way to buy and have shipped from overseas. I should have felt warmth in this heated room, yet my entire body felt like it had been plunged into ice, my blood frozen by the bitter cold outside. Thankfully, I had already overheard their conversation earlier. I recovered quickly and left them with just one sentence. Do whatever you want. A forced fruit is never sweet. If they weren't willing, then I'd go home by myself. Chapter 3. There was only 1 week left until the new year. I had originally booked tickets for 2 days later, planning to stay at home for about a week before returning. But now, I wanted to leave immediately with no set return date. After going back to my room, I checked the tickets. The last bus for tonight was already sold out. I settled for the next best option and rescheduled for the earliest bus tomorrow, departure at 6 a.m. That meant I had to wake up by 5 a.m. at the latest. After setting my alarm and double-checking my luggage, I went to the bathroom to wash up. When I stepped out, I found myself blocked by one big and one small figure. Where's Lucas's milk? Do you even know the best time for a child to drink milk is before 9 p.m.? Look at the time now. Erick's voice carried a hint of impatience. I glanced at the clock. 9:17 p.m. Lucas had always had a weak immune system and frequently fell ill. He disliked the smell of milk, so I had spent countless efforts improving the taste just to get him to develop the habit of drinking it every night. I did it out of love, but this love should never have become ammunition for them to use against me. Drying my hair with a towel, I stepped past them. Does he not have hands? Or do you not have hands? If he wants milk, why can't he pour it himself? Erick's expression darkened. Are you really holding a grudge over not going to your family's house? Is this necessary? My hands froze mid-motion as an overwhelming wave of exhaustion washed over me. Suddenly, I didn't want to live like this anymore. What was the point? In a calm voice, I said, let's get a divorce. I am not your maid. I am not here to serve you two at your every whim. This was the first time I had ever brought up divorce. Even during our worst arguments, I had never said it. Yet now, the words slipped out effortlessly, impulsive yet calculated. It had been buried inside me for years, watered by time until it finally broke through the surface. Erick froze, staring at me in shock. For a moment, I caught a glimpse of panic in his eyes, but he quickly composed himself. Nicole, don't say such hurtful things in the heat of the moment. Divorce isn't something you can just blurt out. The child is right here. Lucas's young face was filled with blame as he looked at me. They both thought I was just acting out. But after so many years, I was simply exhausted. Letting go could take 10 years, or it could take just one moment. I didn't bother explaining. Trying to reason with someone who pretended not to understand was a waste of breath. Without another word, I turned and walked back to my room. Chapter 4. Erick never came back to the bedroom. Not even by the time I fell asleep. It was always like this. Every time we argued, he would hide in the study, waiting for me to cave in and call him back. Maybe it was because of how much I had spoiled him in the past that he had this confidence. I remembered. Back when we were dating, there was a day when Erick received a call from home. I didn't know what was said on the other end, but he remained silent the entire day, not smiling even once. That evening, while we were taking a walk, he suddenly broke down in tears and told me that I was the only person in the world who loved him unconditionally. His parents' love, he said, always came with conditions. He had to excel, win scholarships every year, and send money home. Only then would his parents say a few perfunctory words of affection. My heart ached for him. Unlike him, I had never lacked love. My parents had always been my safety net, giving me a sense of security and strength. So I promised him I would love him forever. From that day on, no matter who was right or wrong, I was always the first to apologize. But tomorrow, I had a long journey ahead of me. I had no time to worry about where he was sleeping tonight. All I cared about was getting enough rest for the road ahead. The alarm woke me up. The bed was empty except for me. Without having to concern myself with Erick and Lucas last night, I had actually slept well for once. Dragging my suitcase behind me, I quietly left the place I had lived in for 10 years. The sub-zero air bit into my skin, numbing my fingers and toes. But the thought of going home kept my heart warm. Only after getting on the bus did I have time to think about what would come next. I had no idea how to explain everything to my parents. Back when I was applying for college, I couldn't bear the thought of leaving home. So I chose a local university. Erick, on the other hand, had come from a small, underdeveloped town and worked hard to get into my city's university. That's where we met, fell in love, and built dreams together. Even now, I still vividly remember those cold winter mornings during college. I was never an early riser, and often skipped breakfast just to get a few extra minutes of sleep. When Erick found out, he started waking up 20 minutes earlier every morning to stand in line and buy my favorite steamed dumplings. I can still picture him walking toward me through the falling snow, his hands frozen red, yet carefully pulling out the steaming dumplings from his coat pocket. The snowfall blurred my vision and clouded my heart. Back then, our love was pure. After graduation, when we started discussing marriage, my parents wanted us to stay in the city. They thought it would be best if we stayed close, so we could look after each other. But Erick had passed the civil service exam in his hometown and was determined to go back and help build his community. When I decided to marry him and move far away, my mom tried to stop me. She had carefully laid out the challenges and hardships of marrying far from home, but young and blinded by love, I ignored all her warnings and followed Erick to his hometown. Never did I imagine that married life would be nothing like what I had dreamed. Chapter 5. I had thought we would each work hard in our respective careers, building our home together through our efforts. But when I got pregnant, Erick began subtly and not so subtly urging me to quit my job and stay home to focus on my pregnancy. The pregnancy was unstable. For the sake of the child, I gave in. After the baby was born, I had planned to return to work, but the child was constantly sick, falling ill every few days. I kept postponing my job search, telling myself I'd go back once he got better. I spent my days running from one hospital department to another, carrying him in my arms, checking in with countless doctors. By the end of the day, my step count on WeChat would show over 20,000 steps, more exhausting than an actual job. Yet, seeing my child's face grow healthier and rosier each day, I felt like it was all worth it. Once his health stabilized, I started thinking about returning to work. I figured I could hire a nanny to take care of him. Erick, however, urged me earnestly. He's still too young to be without his mother. A nanny won't care for him as well as you do. Whenever the child was apart from me, he would cry and throw tantrums. Once again, I gave in, and just like that, I stayed at home for 8 years. The saying goes, distance makes the heart grow fonder, but familiarity breeds contempt. As my son grew older, he no longer clung to me. Instead, he started complaining about me. Mom, why are you always at home doing nothing? You're an adult, and Dad still has to support you? Mom, Don't call my name at the school gate next time, it's so embarrassing. He idolized his father, who dressed in sharp suits and exuded confidence. Whenever he introduced Erick to his classmates, he did so with pride. But when it came to introducing me, he would mumble awkwardly, struggling to find the right words. One day, when I went to pick him up from school, he told his classmates, "She's our housemaid." I stood there, stunned. The young teacher beside me exchanged an awkward glance with me. Both of us momentarily lost for words. I understood. Children go through phases, but that didn't make it hurt any less. Chapter 6. As I transferred to the high-speed train, I received a message from Erick. "Where are you? You left without saying anything. You didn't even prepare breakfast. What is Lucas supposed to do if he starves? Stop being childish. You've made your point, now come home." It was the same old, infuriatingly commanding tone. I hadn't even eaten breakfast myself in my rush to catch the train. Did he really expect me to still be worrying about them? Ignoring his messages, I contacted a lawyer I knew and asked her to draft a divorce agreement and send it to Erick's house. I figured, once he received it, he would finally understand this time. I wasn't bluffing. 10 years of marriage, and I had considered leaving more times than I could count. Facing Erick's suffocating male chauvinism, my son's growing distance and resentment, I asked myself, was this life even worth holding on to? Were they worth it? It felt like a gamble where I had invested more and more over time, yet barely ever won. Now, standing at this crossroads, I had to ask, what was left for me? I had sacrificed so much for this family, yet I couldn't even receive the most basic respect. The road ahead was long. Was this how I wanted to keep living? My mother once told me, if something turns out drastically different from what you expected, cut your losses early. Everything I had given up, let it all be nothing more than a joke in the end. I was 32 years old now, but waking up now. I hoped it wasn't too late. Chapter 7. Nicole still hadn't replied to any of Erick's messages. Meanwhile, Lucas's stomach had been growling for hours. Left with no choice, Erick took him downstairs to find a random breakfast shop. The place was packed with people. Lucas barely ate a few bites before putting down his chopsticks, refusing to continue. The buns were too cold. The soy milk was too sweet. It was nothing like what Nicole made. And it wasn't just the kid being picky, even Erick found the food hard to swallow. Annoyance bubbled up in his heart. Nicole was being way too unreasonable. Just because of something as trivial as going home for the holidays, she left without a word? She actually abandoned her husband and son over such a petty disagreement? How childish. How could a grown woman still be acting like a rebellious teenager running away from home? And why go through all the trouble of traveling such a long distance? If she missed her parents so much, couldn't they just come visit instead? Why couldn't she consider his perspective for once? Erick made up his mind this time. He wouldn't give in. He would let her cool off for a while until she realized her mistake. Time passed, hour by hour. By nightfall, Nicole still hadn't returned. She hadn't even replied to a single message. For the first time, unease crept into Erick's chest. Nicole had no relatives here, no close friends. Where could she have gone? Had something happened to her? That thought made his heart clench. He grabbed his coat and was about to head out to look for her. But just as he reached the door, he hesitated. If he went looking for her, wouldn't that mean admitting he was wrong? If he backed down now, it would set a precedent, one step back today, and he'd be taking 100 more in the future. He couldn't let Nicole think she could just throw a tantrum and get away with it. Suppressing the unease growing inside him, Erick convinced himself everything would go back to normal tomorrow. Chapter 8. Even as I stood at my parents' doorstep, I still hadn't figured out how to explain everything to them. I hesitated for a moment before knocking. When my mom opened the door, the surprise and joy on her face instantly eased my nervousness. My unexpected arrival brought both my parents great happiness. As for Erick and Lucas, I didn't say much. I didn't want to make them worry. At the dinner table, when they were mentioned, I brushed over the topic quickly. It seemed like my parents had already sensed something. Instead of asking further, they simply kept filling my plate with food, silently showing their support without prying. The house had been completely renovated, and the layout felt slightly unfamiliar. But when I carried my luggage into my old room, I was stunned to find it exactly as I had left it 10 years ago. Clean and tidy, the window slightly open to let fresh air in. Warmth surged through my heart, instantly washing away all the exhaustion from my long journey. After spending 3 peaceful days at home, eating, chatting, and enjoying time with my parents, Erick finally lost his patience and reached out to me. "Why didn't you tell me you were going to your parents' house? When are you coming back? I need an explanation. What's with this divorce agreement you sent me? Are you trying to scare me? Do you think I won't go through with it?" His questions came one after another, his tone aggressive. I answered calmly, "I don't have time for such games. I'm serious about the divorce." Erick's voice dropped a few decibels. "What about our son? Did you even ask for his opinion before deciding to get a divorce? This was my marriage. Why should I stay in it just for the child?" I shot back. Did I ask for his opinion when we got married? Yet, we still got married. That shut him up. He went silent for a moment. Then, he said coldly, "I won't give you custody of our son." "Fine by me," I answered indifferently. After all, he always preferred staying with you anyway. For a long time, there was nothing but silence on the other end of the line. I hung up the phone without hesitation. Chapter 9. 3 days had passed, and Nicole still hadn't returned. A strange sense of panic crept up on Erick. She had never stayed angry with him for this long before. Besides, she cared about their son more than anything. Even after their worst fights, she would still message to check on Lucas. Just as Erick was debating whether to call the police, he received a message from his mother-in-law. She asked, "Why did Nicole come home alone? Did you two have a fight?" Erick's face burned with embarrassment, and once again, he blamed Nicole in his heart. Why did she have to bring the elders into this? What had she told them? What if they thought he was mistreating her? Awkwardly, he mumbled a few vague responses to deflect the questions. Knowing Nicole was safe, Erick finally relaxed. He had already given up on playing the waiting game. As long as she came back soon, he wouldn't hold this against her. In his mind, this was nothing more than a minor rough patch in their marriage. Until the divorce papers arrived, Erick immediately called Nicole, convinced she was just trying to scare him. But her tone was firm, unwavering. She was serious. Erick's voice grew harsher, but deep down, he felt an anxiety he couldn't shake. He tried using their son's custody as leverage, but it didn't work. Nicole didn't care. She was even willing to leave Lucas behind. He had lost his only bargaining chip. That night, Mom slept beside me, just like when I was a child. We lay under the covers, whispering to each other in the dark. "If you're unhappy out there, just come home," she said softly. "This will always be your home." I buried my face in her arms and finally let myself cry. Years of silent suffering turned into tears, spilling out until there was nothing left. When I told my parents about my decision to divorce, they didn't try to stop me. They simply said they respected my choice. On New Year's Eve, my parents and I each made our best dishes. The table was filled with plates of delicious food, steaming with rich aromas. It had been so long since I had felt the joy of a New Year's dinner. For the past 10 years, I had been too busy during the holidays. At Erick's parents' house, I had to cook for the entire family alone. By the time I finished making the last dish and brought it to the table, most of the food was already eaten, and instead of saving me a seat, they complained that I was too slow, as if I was just there to cook for them, not even worthy of a guest's treatment. But now, at home, I could finally breathe. Just as my parents and I were about to raise our glasses in celebration, we were interrupted by 2 uninvited guests. Erick stood at the door, carrying large bags of gifts, with Lucas at his side. I frowned. Why was he here? Hadn't I made things clear over the phone? And of all days, he had to come on New Year's Eve. How utterly disgusting. I didn't bother hiding my displeasure. "What are you doing here?" The smile on Erick's face froze instantly. He coughed awkwardly before mumbling, "Lucas wanted to see you." He cried and begged to come. Lucas peeked up at me from behind him. For once, his usual look of disdain was gone. Instead, he nodded hesitantly, as if afraid. How rare. The son who usually pretended not to know me in public actually missed me. What a pity. Because I hadn't thought of him at all. Chapter 10. I had no idea what kind of care Erick had been giving Lucas. But in just a few days, the child looked completely different. His hair was a tangled mess. His face had puffed up, and his sleeves were covered in stains. Lucas lifted his arms, reaching out for a hug. What little motherly instinct I had left told me not to refuse. But as he got closer, the sour, unwashed smell coming off him made me instinctively take a step back. Lucas froze in place, his eyes turning red, unsure of what to do. He was still my child. Our blood connection was something I couldn't deny, but I could no longer embrace him without hesitation, as if nothing had changed. Meanwhile, Erick was being overly polite to my parents, acting just like he had the first time he met them when we were dating. I remembered back then, my parents had welcomed him warmly, only because I had told them in advance, "This is the man I love. Please don't make things difficult for him." This time, their attitudes were cold. The fact that they hadn't kicked him out was already a kindness. Erick picked up his glass and downed 3 drinks in self-punishment, lowering himself in front of them. "Dad, Mom, I'm really sorry for making you worry during the new year. I came to apologize to Nicole. She wants a divorce. Can you help talk her out of it?" My mom immediately responded, her voice cutting. "Oh, don't call us Dad and Mom. You've already signed the divorce papers with our daughter. From now on, let's go our separate ways." My dad, sitting to the side, added with an indifferent tone, "If we were to give advice, it'd be to tell our daughter to leave your hellhole of a home as soon as possible so she doesn't have to keep being bullied by your whole family, treated like a maid. We never wanted her to marry far away in the first place. Now that she's back, just look at what you've turned our once delicate daughter into, thin as a telephone pole." I twitched my lips, holding back a laugh. Honestly, after just a few days at home, I had already gained a bit of weight. But my dad was so emotional about it that he even shed a few tears mid-rant. Erick's face went pale, unable to lift his head under the scolding. For the rest of the night, he just sat there, drinking in silence. In the past, I might have told him to slow down. I might have even thoughtfully prepared him some hangover soup. But now, I only had one thought in my head. He's about to finish my dad's treasured liquor. Chapter 11. The New Year's bell rang. The spring festival gala was about to end. Yet Erick still refused to leave. My mom had already taken Lucas inside to sleep. Lucas was my son. It made sense for him to stay in my home. But Erick? As an outsider now, what was he still doing here? Did he really think he could shamelessly camp out in my house? Fortunately, he wasn't that thick-skinned. After seeing that no one had any intention of offering him a place to stay, he finally got the hint and excused himself. Early the next morning, Lucas came running excitedly into my room, holding out a phone in front of me like an offering. His tone was unusually flattering. "Mom, look." I explained everything to my teacher. "I told her you're not our housemaid, you're my mom." His big eyes blinked at me with a pleading look. "Can you please not divorce Dad? Everyone says that when parents get divorced, the child becomes an abandoned orphan." Lucas had inherited my looks. His brows and eyes were almost identical to mine when I was a child. Whenever he begged me for something, I always struggled to refuse him. I knelt down to meet his gaze and asked, "Tell me, Lucas, do you not want me to divorce your dad because you love me? Or are you just afraid of becoming an orphan with no one to take care of you?" "Of course, it's because I love you, Mom." Lucas didn't even blink as he said it. A perfect little lie. Too bad his acting was terrible. The way his eyes flickered and how tightly he pressed his lips together gave him away immediately. I let out a quiet, self-mocking laugh. I already knew the answer. And yet, it still hurt. A dull, aching pain in my chest. My decision to divorce won't change because of anyone, even if that person is my own child. I had spent my whole life hoping, only to be disappointed every time. Maybe it was finally someone else's turn to feel that disappointment. Chapter 12. Erick still wouldn't give up. He asked to meet and talk on the street we used to frequent during our university days. Most of the stores were still closed for the holiday. The street was eerily quiet, a stark contrast to the bustling liveliness of the past. Much like our marriage, Erick desperately tried to find topics to talk about, reminiscing about old times, hoping to mend our broken relationship. But honestly, I could barely remember those days anymore. 10 years of a miserable marriage had long erased them. Do you remember that spicy hot pot stall we used to go to all the time? It's open today. Want to go eat there again? He had no idea. People from my hometown had always preferred light, mild flavors, while his hometown's food was rich, oily, and heavily spiced. Back then, I went with him not because I liked it, but because he did. Even after we got married, I adjusted my cooking to match his preferences. At first, my stomach would ache constantly, and I'd often have diarrhea. But over time, my body adapted, and I eventually got used to the heavy flavors. But getting used to something doesn't mean liking it. I smiled lightly. I don't like spicy hot pot anymore. Let's not. You don't like it anymore? Erick's lips trembled slightly. Then, forget it. Finally, he stopped bringing up the past. Stories always start with passion and fire, yet in the end, there's nothing left to say. Chapter 13. The road had reached its end. When Erick offered to take me home, I thought of Lucas still being there and didn't refuse. When we arrived, my cousin had just come over with her child to visit for the new year. It had been years since we last saw each other. The moment we laid eyes on one another, we let out excited screams and hugged tightly. Overwhelmed with joy, she grabbed my hand, pulling me into an intense conversation, and before I knew it, I had completely forgotten about Erick. After chatting endlessly, my cousin turned to her daughter and encouraged her. "Sweetheart, greet your aunt." The little girl obediently called out, "Auntie." "What a good girl," I beamed, taking out a red envelope. My voice softened unconsciously. "Here's a lucky red envelope from your auntie. Buy yourself something nice." My niece accepted it with bright, eager eyes and an even sweeter voice. "Thank you, Auntie." I reached out, pulling her toward me for a hug. Before I could even touch her, Lucas came flying out of the room like a firecracker. He shoved my niece to the ground, yelling, "She's my mom. You can't hug her." Shocked, I immediately helped my niece up, shielding her behind me. I looked at Lucas, this child, both familiar and completely unrecognizable. Where had I gone wrong? My mother had loved me unconditionally. I had been raised in that love and given it back to her without hesitation. I had followed that same philosophy with Lucas. Yet, instead of love, he gave me shame and rejection. Outside, he was too embarrassed to acknowledge me, reducing me to a housemaid. At home, I took care of his every need, afraid he would lack for even the smallest thing. But instead of gratitude, he only became more demanding. He yelled at me, treated me with no respect at all. And now, when I had finally given up, he refused to let me go. Fury surged inside me. I did what he did. I pushed him back. "Lucas, apologize to your cousin." Lucas looked at me, his face showing hurt and disbelief. "I didn't do anything wrong. I'm your son." My expression remained firm. "If you still consider yourself my son, then apologize. It's just kids playing around. There's no need to be so harsh." Erick finally spoke up, stepping forward. I didn't even spare him a glance. "This is my house. If you don't like it, take your son and leave." Chapter 14. On the 7th day of the new year, Erick had to return to work. He left Lucas behind with me. Since that incident, I had barely spoken to Lucas. I was too busy submitting resumes and running between interviews. I had no time for him. I had no energy for him. Soon, I landed a job at a company. I began living just like his father, leaving early in the morning, coming home late at night. Every day, I dressed impeccably for work, embodying the image of the mother Lucas had always wanted. Yet, he didn't look happy at all. As the start of the new school term approached, Lucas stopped me on my way out one morning. His eyes were full of anticipation. "Mom, school is starting soon. I'll be leaving soon. Can you take a day off to spend time with me?" I shook my head without hesitation. "I'm afraid not. The project I'm working on is too important. I can't step away." His face fell, unwilling to give up. He pressed. "Is it more important than me?" I didn't answer. I simply stepped past him, opened the door, and walked out. My actions said it all. A mother's love is, of course, unconditional. but the person receiving that love has to be worthy of it. A month later, my project was successfully completed. I received a generous bonus and a few days off. It was time to close some chapters of my life. Chapter 15. I waited at the Civil Affairs office for about 10 minutes before Erick finally showed up. He was dressed decently enough, but the heavy smell of alcohol clung to him. His bloodshot eyes and disheveled state made it obvious he hadn't slept all night. Neither had I. But for me, it was because I was too excited. As for him, I didn't care to know. Erick forced a weak smile. Nicole, you look beautiful today. It reminds me of our university duh. Stop. I cut him off before he could finish. There's no need to bring up those old, tired stories. When we stepped out of the Civil Affairs office, my face was radiant with joy. Meanwhile, Erick's was completely drained of color. His entire body looked wilted, like a man who had just been hollowed out. But even now, he still wouldn't give up. Grabbing the edge of my sleeve, he hesitantly asked, Nicole, if I transfer my job to your city, can I try to pursue you again? Of course. Hope flashed in his eyes, only to be crushed by my next words. You have the right to pursue me, and I have the right to reject you. His face fell, like a man who had lost everything. He wandered off, dazed and broken, and I walked forward, toward my new life. Extra chapter. Erick had always been afraid. Everyone said that most college couples break up after graduation, especially long-distance ones. He had known about Nicole's post-graduation plans long ago. She had always wanted to stay in this city, her home, where her family and friends were. He wanted to stay, too. But Erick's parents were terrified that if he moved too far away, he would abandon them completely. We raised you. We supported you. If you don't come back, you're ungrateful. Erick hated them. Yet, he couldn't break free from them. So he worked hard to secure a government position back home and told Nicole that he wanted to return to develop and build his hometown. He thought she would hesitate, after all. She had never planned on moving far from her parents. But to his surprise, she said she was willing to go with him. Erick knew that Nicole had received an offer from a great company in her city. She never told him, and he played along, pretending not to know. He silently promised himself that he would treat her well for the rest of his life. In their second year of marriage, Nicole started to miss home and wanted to visit. Erick didn't like the idea, but he had no reason to refuse. Luckily, before she could go, she found out she was pregnant. The pregnancy was unstable. She gave up on the trip. That was when Erick convinced her to quit her job and focus on raising their child. Over time, her world shrank. Her social circle grew smaller and smaller. Eventually, Erick and their child became the center of her life. Years passed. The child grew older. Nicole started talking about visiting home again. Erick didn't understand. Why was she so obsessed with going back? Hadn't she married him? Wasn't this her home now? Was she regretting it? Had she finally realized this place was nothing special and now wanted to return to her city? He wouldn't let that happen, so he tried to stop her. But instead, he only pushed her further away, all the way to divorce. Erick still didn't understand. Why was Nicole so determined to leave him? What had he done so wrong? Why was she treating him like a criminal sentenced to death? Hadn't he treated her well? He made money for her, gave her everything, and never forced her to work. Wasn't that enough? He hadn't gambled. He hadn't wasted money on women. Compared to other men who had been divorced, he was practically innocent. Or at least, that's what he told himself. He tried to win Nicole back, but she had already made up her mind. After the divorce, Erick's life spiraled into a daze. At work, he made mistake after mistake. His boss chewed him out mercilessly every day. At home, he kept forgetting to pick up Lucas from school. Every time, Lucas was left alone, the last child waiting. His son resented him, hated him. I don't want to live with you. I want my mom. This is all your fault. You didn't let mom go home. So she left us. Erick ignored him. Nicole hadn't even fought for custody. She had already given up on their son. What right did this kid have to blame him? They lived in different cities now. Without making the effort, he and Nicole would never meet again, until one day, he couldn't resist. He went to her apartment complex and waited outside. After all this time, he finally saw Nicole. She looked happy. She was walking with her parents, smiling as they chatted. Erick tried to remember when was the last time he had seen Nicole smile like that. But no matter how hard he thought, he couldn't recall. Had she always looked so exhausted? The next time he saw Nicole was at a class reunion, sitting in the corner. He kept glancing toward the entrance, waiting, wondering, would she come? Finally, she arrived. But she wasn't alone. A man walked in beside her. The two of them stood close, their movements intimate. Erick didn't dare look, didn't dare ask, didn't dare know. Instead, he fled. After that, Erick started drinking. Alcohol was a wonderful thing. It made everything disappear. Pain, regret, Nicole. He fell in love with being drunk. Only when he was drunk could he see Nicole again. Even when he vomited blood, he still clutched the bottle, refusing to let go. Until one night, he never woke up. A faint smile rested on his lips, as if, in the end, he was having the sweetest dream.